Oh, yeah, they've got too many sticks, all right. We've got a couple big sticks here, including Donnie Deutsch in New York City. After today, folks, there are only 2 Fridays left before the finale of this presidential contest. And yet again, Republicans are going into the weekend beat up, bruised, and more convinced than ever that this race, at the presidential level at least, is essentially over. Since Donald Trump self-sabotaged his final debate performance by refusing to say that he would accept the outcome of the election, the Republican nominee's attempt to clean up his mess only made it worse. And then last night, Trump made history in Gotham City as the first presidential candidate ever to get booed at the quadrennial Al Smith Catholic Charity Dinner. Today, at a rally in North Carolina, Trump was still in a fighting mood. He took a rare swipe at Hillary Clinton's most beloved surrogate, First Lady Michelle Obama, and that is a no-no. But he also said he'll be happy with the way he ran his campaign, win or lose.
I don't know what kind of shape I'm in, but I'll be happy, and at least I will have known. Win, lose, or draw, and I'm almost sure if the people come out, we're going to win. But I will be happy with myself.
Well, Donald Trump singing that old Frank Sinatra tune, I Did It My Way, but his prospects seem to be getting more dire by the day. A new Georgia poll by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution shows him with a narrow lead in that red state, 44 to 42%. That is effectively a statistical tie. And the former Republican chairman, Michael Steele, is now reportedly saying he will not vote for his party's nominee and adding a bunch of really harsh language about Trump in that. Donnie, my question for you is, given the way that Trump has acted over the past couple days and the growing sense of doom within his party, what should Republicans do over the course of these last 18 days before the election?
Other than cry. By the way, I have to quote Chuck Todd about the Al Smith dinner. Trump is the first guy to ever lose the Al Smith dinner, which is an unlosable charity event. I mean, stunning. Here's the conundrum for the Republicans, and I actually think they only have one play here. Obviously, if you're Kelly Ayotte or you're Pat Toomey or you're the RNC, you're trying to get those swing voters, those moderate voters, those independent voters. Let's take 3 facts. Number 1, a avid Trump supporter is an avid Trump supporter. Number 2, an avid Hillary hater is a lot of people. Particularly, some people are actually going to be voting for Hillary Clinton, and that's the play. You take an overall stance. It's basically, look, we need to protect the fort. Let's stop Hillary Clinton one way or the other. This way, you don't disenfranchise the Trump zealots that you're going to need them. They can't drift off. They've got to come to the polls. And it's a way to get some of those people that are actually going to vote for Hillary so begrudgingly. Even some of those 69% of people that do not like her are going to vote for her or theoretically can't get elected. Give them permission to say, no, we're going to stop her, but we're going to stop her in a different way. Somehow get that message out. It keeps the actual candidates clean and gets the message out.
Well, Donnie, I think there's one way to get that message out, and we're starting to see it already. Up in New Hampshire, the Chamber of Commerce, which has a lot of money and wants to protect the Republican Senate majority, has got an ad that they're putting up, the first one of the cycle, that is very explicitly saying, elect Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire in order to keep a balance on Hillary Clinton as president. Now, it doesn't go out and say we're giving up on the presidency, and it doesn't say that we're accepting in any explicit way that Hillary Clinton's going to win. But I think that's the first of what's going to be probably, if not an avalanche, at least a pretty substantial number of ads like that ad, where outside groups who are basically acknowledging that Clinton is probably going to win are now going to try to desperately to keep hold of that Senate majority by making that argument explicitly, by basically saying, you know what, this is the last best hope we have to stop the Clinton agenda. Let's just focus down ballot and vote explicitly as a countercheck to her. Forget about Donald Trump. Don't talk about him. If not, don't repudiate him, but also don't talk about him.
It makes so much sense because the polls are showing us so many people who are voting for Hillary. They're not voting for her. They're voting against Trump. Give those people permission to put her in a box. And I think that's going to be a very, very, very sound strategy. I know a lot of people personally that would play along with that game. Okay, the Associated Press is now reporting that Hillary Clinton's campaign is preparing for a scenario in which Donald Trump refuses to concede the presidential election if he loses next month. I should say when he loses next month. That scenario, of course, would complicate a crucial transition period for the campaign, as well as for the country that has been bitterly divided over this election. Big John, with increasing speculation that Trump might challenge the integrity of this election, what happens next if he refuses to acknowledge a Clinton victory?
Well, I think a huge amount hinges, Donnie, on how close the outcome is. If Hillary Clinton wins by a lot, it'll be very hard for Donald Trump to not concede. If Hillary Clinton only wins by a little, or only wins by a little in a number of states, you could imagine this scenario in which Donald Trump as he has suggested over the course of the last week, decides not to concede for a period of time or maybe ever. It's smart for the Clinton campaign to be thinking about that. It's smart for them to be thinking about what the message is they would want to put out in that circumstance. But I will say this. If that is the way Donald Trump goes, and I'm not talking about recounts or a super razor-close election, but if Donald Trump refuses to concede and it's clear that she's won, he will go down in history even more ignominiously than he may already be slated to do as someone who really does not respect American democracy.
I think he'll go down in history next to Joe McCarthy as one of the true nefarious characters in American history. You know who's stealing the election? Donald Trump, and he's stealing it from us. The other night I was watching TV with my daughter, and Trump was on talking about rigged elections, and I kind of changed the subject because I didn't want her first introduction at age 12 to be about, can elections be rigged? 45% of Republicans actually think that's the case. That's the scorched earth he's going to leave behind. He's Donald the Destroyer. What he said early on is exactly true. I, Donald Trump, are going to be happy after this, whatever happens, but I'm going to leave these turds in my wake. One of them being half of the country right now not believing that our elections, our fundamental bedrock of our democracy, are real and believable. It's disgusting. It's reprehensible. And we kind of talk about this dispassionately at this point. Who does he think he is? Just go away. You're vile.
Look, my hope is that if Hillary Clinton wins by a decisive margin, that Donald Trump will, for maybe the first time in this campaign, realize that he has responsibilities that are not just to himself and his followers, and those are real responsibilities to yourself and your followers, but also has responsibilities to the system, has responsibilities to the country. I don't know if he'll find that his way there, but I hope for all of our sakes that he does if that circumstance arises. All right, it is time now for our daily WikiLeaks update. The group put out a tweet last night that seemed to suggest that there may be a surprise in store for Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine and DNC interim chair Donna Brazile. So far, that threat has been a damp squib, but there were other new emails that are getting some notice today. One was from longtime Clinton aide Huma Abedin, who allegedly suggested that Hillary Clinton solicited a $12 million commitment to her foundation from the King of Morocco in exchange for hosting a 2015 foundation meeting in the country. Another message appears to be from longtime Clinton aide Doug Band, who purportedly complained about Bill Clinton not having to sign a conflict of interest document at the Clinton Foundation, even though he is paid by foundation sponsors and, quote, gets many expensive gifts from them, some that are at home, etc., end quote. The Clinton campaign has long cited federal officials who say the Russian government is behind this email hack. And David Sanger from the New York Times has a brand new piece out today that points out that if Hillary Clinton wins next month, she'll enter the White House with the most openly hostile relationship with Russia since the Cold War. Donnie, this seems like the big deal here to me. You know, we've been focused on the short-term electoral impact of WikiLeaks and the WikiLeaks hack. But my question for you is, the government is convinced that Russia's behind this. That's everyone across the board. I'm here in Washington talking to national security and intelligence officials. They all say Russia is behind this whole thing. Hillary Clinton believes it. She's trashing Putin. What are the implications long-term for U.S.-Russia relations if she becomes president?
Steve Schmidt gave it a very brilliant and passionate speech about this is the first act of cyber war. We talk about it. We talk about what's in it as opposed to what's happening. And I actually think this is going to be a benefit for Hillary Clinton. The best way to get kind of constituencies together is a common enemy. And Mitt Romney was right. This is our big geopolitical enemy at this point. And I think Hillary Clinton's going to come out swinging. It's easy. When you have a face, we used to have Osama bin Laden. Now we have ISIS. There's no face there. There's a face on Vladimir Putin. And I think Hillary will come out swinging and use this and other things that are going on, the Ukraine, the short-term the short-range nuclear missile buildup, hostility towards other NATO nations. She's going to use this because there's a common enemy here, and that's the best way to get groups together. And I think this is actually going to play to her benefit.
One of the craziest things about this campaign is the way in which Donald Trump has cozied up to Vladimir Putin repeatedly and systematically over the course of the campaign, if for no other reason than the fact that Putin is really unpopular in America. He's not a popular figure. His approval rating's down below 10%. I think, look, you never want to start off in an unprecedentedly or a supremely hostile situation with one of the great powers in the world. But I do think that from Hillary Clinton's point of view, part of the reason why she's making these arguments about Putin now is not just to try to discredit the WikiLeaks thing, although she is doing that for sure. She also, I think, is trying to lay down a sense, she's kind of trying to cast Putin and make clear what he has tried to do in this election, which is to intervene in the American electoral process so that she has the political constituency behind her to do what she needs to do if she's the next president and has to deal with Russia. Okay, up next, things get nasty. We'll talk about the latest meme in presidential politics right after this.
Payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund.
Since that moment in Wednesday's debate, Donald Trump's nasty woman comment has taken on the quality of a meme, tapping into an intense and broad resonance, inspiring T-shirts and buttons, and catching on like wildfire on social media, particularly among women of all generations. And it's putting other Republicans on the spot now as well. Today on Fox News, a Republican congressman from Texas, Brian Babin, was asked about Trump's choice of words and defended his nominee, saying, quote, "Sometimes a lady needs to be told when she's being nasty." Okay. So with that, we are joined now by Stephanie Shriak, the president of Emily's List, which has a famous affiliation with women candidates around the country. Stephanie, Hillary Clinton in the debate did a couple things that can have resonance with women. One, she defended abortion rights in a very forthright way. She went after Donald Trump as a sexual predator. But this nasty meme seems to have caught on more than anything. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we watched that debate and saw an incredibly strong leader in Hillary Clinton, and then right at the end, you heard this, and even for me, and I watch all of this, right? I'm a junkie of politics, and I even felt a little bit like it was a sucker punch at the end. And I think for so many women, for so many of us around the country, we've been in that room when some unqualified guy says something snarky or tries to belittle us right at the end, and it just, like, enough is enough. And I think that it's why it has caught the attention, and because it went to our gut, right? It was a gut hit, and we're seeing it all over. The energy of women of all ages, like you said, young women, older women, across the board, who are like, that's it. Hillary Clinton is the most qualified. We are proud to stand by her. She deserves to be president, and we're not going to take it anymore. And I think that's what you're seeing all over social media, and what you're going to see on Election Day, even in early vote, as we're seeing that around the country now.
Stephanie, it's Donnie. It's interesting. I felt that moment I know the media has gone with the rigged elections, but I was stunned at that. And to me, there was such a misogynistic tone in that. What's interesting, I've always talked about how so much of this was going to be about gender. How did a man and a woman go at each other on stage? And Hillary, amazingly so, after being told she has hate in her heart and she needs to be locked up, we know all the things, she has never responded with belligerence, because I think they've done research and said a lot of men, we still live in this world, do not want to see a woman harshly respond to the man. So she was very disciplined. On the flip side, women certainly did not want to see that kind of harsh response, and I think that was certainly not in line with the sexual assaults, but on the same path of a basic dislike for women. But by the way, what she did at that moment wasn't even that nasty. It was just a little jab.
But it was like the jab that was heard around the country, right? It was just that instant. It was this, like, right in the gut. And like I said, even personally, and he said so many offensive things from the very first day he announced his candidacy. He said things that shocked me that day. But when I heard that at the debate, man, I knew it instantly that this was going to be a moment where 7 out of 10 women already dislike him. You know, this is someone who's bragged about sexual assault. We're already there, but this was like the extra bit of, like, how do I put it? We shifted into high gear, and now it's like, we got to get this done. We got to make sure that everybody gets out there, that we vote, that we talk to our sisters and our brothers and our husbands and our entire family and say, enough's enough. This is the time to end this. And I think that's that little bit for women, using that term nasty, and the way he did it, it really did catch, it caught fire. Ignited
Stephanie,
fire, maybe.
Yeah, Stephanie, I just want to clarify on behalf of my co-host. I believe what Donnie was saying when he's called something a little jab was what Hillary Clinton said about Donald Trump's taxes was a little jab, and that then Trump overreacted.
Oh.
Just so you're clear, I don't think Donnie was saying that what Trump said was a little jab.
What was, okay.
Yeah, just to defend Donnie. He gets in enough trouble on his own, but I like to try to help him out.
I love you. I feel the love over here, even though we're not together.
Here's my question for you, Stephanie. I think one of the things that's really powerful to me about this is the way in which it's resonant to me with times in which groups that are often discriminated against or treated poorly embrace terms of opprobrium that are used against them, right? So there was a period of time when gays and lesbians adopted the term queer in a kind of defiant way when they heard homophobes calling them queer. They just sort of took it up as a badge of honor. That feels to me like what's happening here, especially among a lot of the younger women who've taken to this very quickly, that there's a kind of like, they're kind of like, you want to call me nasty? You're damn right I'm nasty.
You are seeing it all over social media. I mean, even at Emily's List, where we have a campaign that's going incredibly well called "Women Can Stop Trump," you know, you saw the logo go out, and it was "Nasty Women Can Stop Trump." There is something about that. It's because when you hear it initially, and it's so painful that you have sort of two choices. You can sort of crumble underneath it, or you can stand up and be proud and prove that person wrong. And I think that's what we're seeing women across the country doing, is exactly that. We're going to stand up.
I think to that point, Stephanie, I think women are going to rise up. I think watching Trump, I think, and a lot of guys are saying this, and I'm saying this, that maybe it's time for women to take over. You know, Merkel, Golda Meir, Thatcher, Indira Gandhi, hasn't gone so bad. And I just think it's been a male with the worst male behavior we've ever seen. And I think whatever the polls are showing by women, it's going to be, and then some. They have had it. And I think a lot of men are kind of saying, let's give the lady a chance. I think there's something underneath here happening.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because it is way beyond time for us to finally crack through that glass ceiling. And we have in Hillary Clinton someone who stood on that debate stage with grace and with grit to just say, hey, I am prepared to do this. And really, I saw during that entire debate, forget about the last moments there, but that entire debate, almost an evolution, another step toward really becoming the leader of the free world. And I was just so inspired by her performance. And then her ability to sort of stand and smile and say, you know, you can say whatever you're going to say, Donald Trump. We've all been around those Donald Trumps like that. It doesn't matter. The stakes are too high, and we're going to stay focused. And I think it's really an inspiration to women across the country as well.
All right, Stephanie Shriak, from my partner, nasty man, Donnie Deutsch, and from me, thank you for being on the show. Up next, we'll have some monkey business on the show. We'll talk to Survey Monkey pollster John Cohen when we come right back.
I want to say I miss John in the studio here because he defends me and I love him. With us now from Stanford, California is John Cohen, Senior Vice President of Survey Research at Survey Monkey. All right, John, let's first on the presidential level. We're going to go down ballot in a minute. We've been talking for months about a narrow electoral path for Donald Trump. How narrow is that path right now?
Well, it's extraordinarily narrow right now, and it's probably closed a lot in the last 6 weeks since the, all three presidential debates and the vice presidential debate, didn't help him nationally, and certainly is not helping him in the states. He's a very narrow path that goes through the Midwest, but Clinton's now contesting places that Trump shouldn't be defending, like Arizona and even Texas in our data.
Hey, so John, Sean Heilman here. I've been looking at your polling over the past month. I know you look at your polling all the time. We just finished these big three debates, right? And there are some people who think that they were masterful performances by Hillary Clinton. They really moved the needle in terms of actually how the election is being fought out on the ground. So the impact of the tapes that Donald Trump had to suffer from, the accusations. What's been the effect of these last basically 3 weeks on the polling of all the stuff that's happened?
Yeah, it's really collateral damage to the Trump campaign. What we've seen on the Democratic side is that Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents have become increasingly supportive of Clinton, just like you would expect in the closing weeks of a campaign. But that just hasn't happened on the Republican side. Republicans are staying at the level of support they've had for Donald Trump over the last 6 weeks. So, this is a really big missed opportunity for him, and in part because of the damage, that he's done to himself, by the tapes and the reaction to them.
John, let's move down ballot a little bit. Obviously, let's talk about a potential wave. What is the tipping point as far as a popular vote or as far as an electoral vote where it really starts to take its toll down ballot? Let's start with New Hampshire, for instance.
Yeah, well, New Hampshire, we actually have the Democrats ahead in both the Senate and the governor's races. And, we see that, and there are a lot of really closely contested ones from North Carolina to Arizona, surprisingly, for Senator McCain. So it's really close. And your last segment was about female voters. They really will tip the balance in all of these states. When you look at the gender gap across all of these states and nationally, it's as big as we've ever seen. And when you combine that with the education gap that there is in the country, you have white women with college degrees going, incredibly for Democratic candidates, which puts lots of southern states in play, not only for Clinton, but also for the Senate candidates. So the Democrats are in a good position, not as good as Clinton is in terms of winning the White House, but they do have a shot at taking over the Senate.
So, yeah, John, let me just drill into that a little bit further. You know, I hear from Republican pollsters who are doing private polling for various candidates all the time that they're sort of freaking out right now, and that if Hillary Clinton were to get up to win the presidential election, if she got up, right now her polling average, she's up by about 6. If she got up to 8, 9, the Senate would be gone for sure for Republicans under those circumstances, and the House might be in jeopardy. What do you see in your numbers in terms of the likelihood of, like, what would you put the likelihood at right now of Democrats retaking the Senate and the House?
Well, in our national polling, we're right at that 6 number you mentioned. We have been as high as 9 and 10, and we've been as low as 1, but not for a very long time. Clinton's lead has been steady nationally. There are no signs that it's gone up over the course of the last month, you know, despite all the damage to the Trump campaign that's been reported. She hasn't increased that lead dramatically, so it's kind of hard to believe what she could do at this point to increase it more to 9 or 10. So it's going to come down to some of the idiosyncrasies of these really close races, and again, hinge on turnout, and particularly among female voters.
John, I'm going to put you on the spot as somebody who's been following this. Give me the electoral number. Does she get near 400?
Oh, gosh. Right now, we have her pretty solidly above 270. So, you know, kind of when we talk about how narrow his path is, it's extraordinarily narrow or non-existent if you look at the data today. She has a shot in the, you know, the mid 300s, but I doubt she'll get to 400 unless, you know, only millennials could vote.
All right, John, you're a scholar and a gentleman deserving of much praise. Coming up, we will show you the Ohio interview that Trump walked out of yesterday. But first, these words from our sponsors.
"19 days out from the election, you've been labeled a racist, you've been called a sexist.
Thank you very much.
How do you respond to that?
I am the least racist person you've ever met.
That was Donald Trump speaking, or rather not really speaking. to an NBC reporter in Delaware, Ohio yesterday. We are joined now in New York by Republican strategist and crisis communications consultant Susan Del Percio. And here in our nation's capital is Democratic strategist and former White House communications director, Anita Dunn. Anita, let me start with you. You're watching Donald Trump there, walking out of interviews. You've been a communications director and have guided many a candidate. What do you think that says when you see a candidate do that? It tells you what?
It tells you the candidate doesn't want to answer questions from reporters, which means the candidate doesn't feel things are going well, which generally means it's a campaign that is on the downward trend. So it's not a good thing when people start walking away from interviews with reporters. If they feel like they're in a good mood, they're not going to do that.
Susan, let me ask you this question. You've done a lot of crisis communications. I think in political terms, after the debate on Wednesday night when Donald Trump said he wouldn't necessarily abide by the election results, some people said that was a political crisis for him. The next day he went out and gave a speech in which he sort of doubled down on it, in some respects made it worse by saying he would abide by the election results if they went his way. So how do you think Donald Trump's handling this particular moment where a lot of people are sort of freaked out by what he said at the debate?
Well, he's handling it terribly. He really needs to stop with this nonsense. A lot of for example, he has at least moved from there's a national conspiracy with black helicopters and men in tinfoil hats, so that's good. But he's got to move off of these contested elections. Right now, in states like Florida and Ohio, there's an automatic recount if it's close. So he doesn't have to do all this nuance. He should get back on track, get on his message. That's the only time he has been really effective in the polls.
Susan, I want to stay with you as a crisis manager, not even a Republican strategist. Let's go past the election, assuming Donald loses. From where I sit, and this is what I did for a living, he's destroying his brand. And we're seeing it already. Hotels are down 30, 40%. People are canceling golf trips. I mean, we know the reasons why. So if he brought you in at this point, post-election, and says, okay, I got to go back to being Donald. How do I get this stuff away? How does he do it, and can he do that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that he's going to have to do to restore his brand is handle election night with some dignity and some grace. That could be the beginning of the rehab, if you will. I think he's hearing a lot from his children that, Dad, we've got to get this back on track. We've got to go, we're hurting right now. But that's where I would start.
Anita, I actually agree with Susan. I think he's going to do is he set up a surprise, because I think he's smart enough to know he needs a reboot, and I actually do think he's going to, believe it or not, be gracious on election night and go from there. Let's say he does, and let's say the mantle is handed to Hillary at that point on a non-conspiracy level, on a typical, peaceful passage of power. What would be her first key things in her first 100 days during the transition?
Well, I think for Hillary Clinton, if she's elected president, a key thing for her will be to very early on in her transition, reach out to Republicans, reach out to independents, and demonstrate, show, not tell, that she's very serious about trying to bring everyone together.
Give me a for instance, because obviously she's got to reach across to that's 101. Give me a specific thing that she could do, a tactic that would kind of all of a sudden go, wow, maybe this is going to be a little different than we thought.
Well, I'll give you two tactics that she could do potentially. One of them is that she could sit down with Donald Trump very early. She said to him last night that, I'm going to need, we're all going to have to work together. She could actually call Donald Trump, sit down with him, talk to him. That would be, I think, a dramatic thing. The second thing she could do, though, is she could actually go to Capitol Hill and meet with the leadership of both parties, go up there, not make them come to her. And that would also be, I think, a strong signal.
Susan, I want to talk to somebody who would be a colleague of yours, Kellyanne Conway. She looks really tired. I think she's great, but she's got an unwinnable job. What would you say if you were managing her career now? Because she's in an interesting juncture. I mean, she's got a brand, and she can go down with the ship also. Obviously, she's not going to abandon him. What would you tell her to do over the next 18 days?
She doesn't have to do anything. Kellyanne's brand is solid as can be. Yes, she went to work for a difficult candidate, but she has maintained very good relationships. And actually, the fact that she has gone on the networks so much, and she's been on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, that has shown that she is willing to, always stay in touch. So I don't think she has anything to worry about.
All right, I agree. I think she's great, by the way. Hey, guys, I really appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you.
stuff, all right? Up next, Sir Eddie Glaude, our former friend, our good friend, not our former friend, he's our current friend from Princeton. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio Bloomberg 99.1. We will be right back.
for our country is completely and utterly lacking in hope. A candidate who tells us that our country is desperate and weak. Barack and I, and our friend Hillary, we have a very different perspective on this country. One that has everything to do with where we come from and how we were raised. He just doesn't understand us. Maybe that's why he calls communities like the one where I was raised hell.
His closing argument asks, what do you have to lose? Well, I'm here to tell you everything. Civility is on the ballot. Tolerance is on the ballot. Justice is on the ballot. Equality is on the ballot. Our democracy is on the ballot.
That was, of course, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama out on the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton this week. Joining us now from New Jersey, Dr. Eddie Glaude. He is the professor of religion and African-American studies at Princeton University and chair of the Center for African-American Studies. Eddie, good to see you not so early in the morning and finally in a respectable time.
Indeed.
You know, that is, I don't care what your politics are, that is an incredible couple. And we know, obviously, President Obama's approval rating in the low to mid-50s. I think if they took Michelle Obama's approval rating, it would be in the mid-70s. Question, are they enough together? And it's very personal for them. And we've never seen a president or a first lady out on a campaign trail as incumbents as they've been for an incoming potential president. Are they enough to galvanize as much of an African-American turnout as we need? And even a tougher question, if you had to send one out, who would you send out at this point?
Well, I would probably, the second question is the easier question. I would probably send out Michelle Obama. She's always been beloved in black communities across the country for a variety of reasons. And she seems of the two to be really effective on the campaign trail. As to the first question, Donnie, I think it's certainly not enough, but it won't hurt. The fact that you have the president with his favorability and Michelle Obama with her effectiveness on the campaign trail making the case in the context of Donald Trump engaging in all sorts of racial dog whistles in terms of voter fraud. You know, check out Philadelphia, check out Chicago, check out St. Louis. Those are claims or dog whistles or foghorns, as you might say, to say, look at these black and brown people who are going to steal the election. And so to have them out on the campaign trail offering the counter argument, indicting and condemning Donald Trump can't help but be effective. But again, I think Secretary Clinton is going to have to do even more to get us excited, or to keep us excited, to keep the enthusiasm up.
Eddie, I want you to take me onto the campus as a professor. Obviously, you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of millennials, black, white, every color. And I've been shocked at their apathy and their lack of appetite for Hillary Clinton. I understand she's their parents' candidate, but as far as free tuition and as far as her take on climate, I mean, this is in the wheelhouse for anybody in that millennial age bracket, and they're just not biting.
Yeah, I think there's a matter of trust. Many of them were supporters of Bernie Sanders, and many of them heard her counter argument to his initial recommendation around these issues. Remember, she said that they weren't doable, that these issues weren't practical, that Bernie Sanders was in effect naive, and so there's a sense in which they don't believe she's coming to these issues with full faith. And I think there's also a deep skepticism, Donnie, about the current two-party system. Young millennials are active. They're making, I think, rational choices, and I think they are generally dissatisfied with the current political climate, and they're trying to figure out how to act politically. But there's a new study out, Gen Forward, at the University of Chicago, particularly breaking down millennials of color, and what they see in the data is that although there's skepticism, black millennials are breaking towards Hillary Clinton. And her campaign should be at least excited about that. But it's still kind of couched in a general skepticism about whether or not she's really committed to these issues, right? So they know that if she gets in office, they're questioning whether when she gets in office, will she even pursue these issues?
Eddie, I want to ask you a question just in a broad sense.
Sure.
We've now finished these 3 debates, right? All of them massively rated, 80-some million in the first one, 60-some million in the second one, 70 million in the third one. There was a discussion in the first debate that Lester Holt led about criminal justice issues and a little bit about race. Beyond that, I don't think the topics was broached for the rest of the debate. So if you're an African-American man or woman, any age, watching those 3 debates in America, your takeaway is what?
Well, it's not only invisibility, but disposability, John. And what made the second debate, what made the silence in the second debate more egregious was that they were at Washington University in St. Louis, just 15 minutes down the street from Ferguson. And Hillary Clinton didn't even broach the subject, and she could have, particularly when the question came about or was asked, could Donald Trump govern all of America? And so part of what we have seen, and I've said this before, is that there's a kind of confusion on the part of the Clinton campaign. On the one hand, they seek to activate the Obama coalition. They want to kind of take those constituencies, get them excited, motivated to go out and win. But on the other hand, they want to activate the coalition that elected Bill Clinton. And that coalition that strategy, it seems to me, was predicated upon triangulation, right? And that involved, in some ways, kind of taking black voters for granted. And so it seems to me that confusion is evidenced, or has been evidenced over the course of this campaign, and has been evidenced throughout the debates as well. And so as an African-American voter, I must admit, I was pretty upset as I was watching.
Yeah, I had a feeling you might be, just knowing you a little bit. So let me take that answer to that question and now loop it back to the first answer you gave to Donnie, right? So if I were running for president and I was a Democrat and I had Michelle Obama and Barack Obama on my side, I would have them out there every day I could, given their popularity and their skills as performers. But if I were an African-American voter in a swing state or in a battleground state, and I felt like that the job of getting me excited was being outsourced by the Clinton campaign to the black president and the black first lady, I might think that was a little condescending. Am I wrong to think that that's a little condescending, or that you might feel that way if you were African American?
Well, some may feel that way, John. I think more than anything, I think African American voters want to confront candidates who are seriously thinking about issues that are confronting their communities. And so you can send surrogate after surrogate. If it was, it could be Barack Obama, it could be Michelle Obama, it could be Bernie Sanders, right? It could even be Usher or Chris Brown or Beyonce. Well, Beyonce might be kind of exciting. But, you can send these surrogates out, right? You can send these surrogates out. But at the end of the day, I think African Americans want to hear what? They want to hear policies around, they want to hear policy platforms around employment. They want to hear how you're going to substantively address criminal justice. They want to hear how you're going to address housing the housing crisis in our communities. And it's not enough to send us to the white papers that you've written. You have to lay out the policies in detail so that then we can then engage you, right? And so the urban policy that we've heard from the Clinton campaign, for example, I have a lot of questions. Are we going to rely on enterprise zones again? We've been relying on that for a long time. Is that sufficient, right? So we need to, I think at the end of the day, we need to start treating African American voters as substantive, thoughtful, rational actors and not apolitical creatures. Obama and the Obamas are going to do a great job, but again, going back to Donnie's question, they're not sufficient. We need more.
Eddie Glaude, I love listening to you. One of the smartest guys around. Appreciate it, buddy. Up next, money, money, and more money. We will break down the latest campaign fundraising hauls right after this.
Further deepening the sense of foreboding within the Republican Party these days are some new fundraising numbers out just now that show Democrats are outraising Republicans in every way on every level, from what was raised to what was spent to cash on hand. Hillary Clinton is outpacing Donald Trump. Democrats are outspacing Republicans. Here with us to talk more about this and other topics of interest is Matea Gold of the Washington Post. Matea, great to have you here today. We're just showing a bunch of stuff on our wall there that illustrates the point that I was just making, which is Democrats seem to be ahead in most important respects. Am I right to think that that's something that if I were a Republican right now looking at everything else that's going on in the world, that would be just another cause for deep concern?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it the icing on the cake or also just sort of a symptom of the larger problem, right? I mean, one of the things that is happening now is that Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party had twice as much money on hand as Republicans and Donald Trump heading into this last final month before Election Day. By any way you measure it, that is not helpful. And if you look at actually how they're spending their money, you also see that the Democrats have a huge advantage, especially on the ground and in the air. So Hillary Clinton's campaign spent $66 million last month just on ads. That was 3 times as much as Donald Trump. She has 815 paid staff. He had 168. So the numbers really show the huge difference in infrastructure.
Right. So, Matea, let me ask you the obvious sort of question, right? I mean, Donald Trump has had a horrific 3 weeks, just horrific by any historical standards in terms of the stories he's been dealing with, the controversies he's been immersed in, how he's handled them, all of that stuff. And Hillary Clinton's massively outspending him. And yet, although she has a demonstrable lead nationally, about 6 points according to the polling averages, and she's pulling ahead in a lot of battleground states, it's not a runaway yet, right? We just had on the director of SurveyMonkey who said he doesn't see a landslide in the offing. So why is that?
Well, I mean, it's clear, we've seen this dynamic since the beginning of this election cycle, that this is an incredibly polarized electorate. And there were people that made up their mind very early on about both these candidates, and they just are not going to be budged. And really, this election is coming down to fighting over those last little slices of the demographic that still, for whatever reason, haven't made up their mind. But, you know, I do think we saw more volatility post-Labor Day than we typically do. And that's in part, I think, pollsters have said, because there's also not great affinity for these candidates. So while there's a lot of animus on both sides, people have doubts about their own candidate they're supporting, and so they're able to be swayed. But we're seeing it just going back and forth enough just at the margins, not the huge sweep in one direction or another.
Hey, Matea, it's Donnie. I want to do a wiki pivot and do our daily wiki update, and I guess that's the point, that every day something drips out. Today it's about interacting with the King of Morocco and a $12 million donation. One of the reasons, clearly, none of this is getting traction is because Donald steals it every day by doing something over the top. Even if Donald was behaving like a normal candidate, it doesn't feel like any of this stuff is sticking.
Well, I mean, we have spent quite a bit of time looking through the emails that are being released, and we have to put into context that, you know, taken alone, some of these emails seem dramatic or alarming, and it's important to do some reporting around them and really understand what they say and what they signify about the way Clinton has operated in her campaign, and also how the foundation operated. And so far, we have not seen this kind of dramatic bombshell that WikiLeaks and others have promised. I do think we're seeing a lot of fascinating insights into how she managed her campaign, approached this race. I mean, really interesting nuances when you get behind the scenes and try to have a better understanding of the political calculations they've been making. But if anything, these revelations have sort of reinforced perceptions of the way she approached a lot of the issues this year. I don't think they've really delivered any huge surprises.
That's it. It's inside baseball. It's interesting. The reason the emails stick is because the average person go, oh, she erased 33,000 emails. She must be up to no good. The average voter hears this stuff, and there's just not a headline there. There's not a soundbite there. There's not something to get their arms around. What would be an extreme situation? What would be that soundbite? The kind of thing that a Republican would be drooling to see in an email?
I mean, at this point, it's very hard to just speculate about hypotheticals about what would be in there and what would actually garner headlines. I mean, I don't think it's helpful for her to have this constant press of stories about the political calculations that her strategists were making in trying to figure out how to make decisions on TPP, for example. And that doesn't help her with her labor allies. It doesn't help her with the business community. So there's no question this is not helpful. But, you know, I don't think we have any indication we're going to see any wrongdoing in these emails. And a lot of it is just sort of filling in the gaps of a story that we've seen play out over the last almost 2 years now.
Mattea, I want to bring our conversation to an end in this last minute we have together with the way that everybody wants to end a Friday afternoon, which is talking about journalistic self-investigation, the sense of things that we journalists like to think about in the dark nights of our soul. You cover this WikiLeaks thing, and it's complicated, this story, because you're dealing with stolen goods here, basically, right? And so there's questions about how you verify that these emails that have been leaked are real. But there's also the question that's been posed by a lot of people. Is it okay for us to be covering, you know, property that's really been stolen, presumably by Russia, handed to WikiLeaks, and now put out to try to intervene in an American election in an unprecedented way? So how do you guys grapple with that at the Post, and you yourself personally?
Yeah, so we obviously take that issue really seriously. I think our view is this material is out there. It's being interpreted by people who actually don't have a lot of knowledge of the reporting or nuances of these issues. I think we actually can help serve our readers by bringing some context and reporting around some of these emails and provide a fuller picture of what was actually happening.
Yeah, I know you guys are handling this responsibly, and I didn't mean to suggest that at all. I just want to be clear. Thank you, Mattea. That's a very thoughtful answer. Really great to have you on the show, and we will be right back.